Preacher Volume 2 Until the End of the World, written by Garth, Ennis, art by Steve Dillon. Alright, Preacher Volume 2. This is actually a very long trade paperback, so I'm going to be splitting Volume 2 into two videos. This video covers the first story arc called Until the End of the World, and next week will be Part 2, the Hunter's story arc. I gotta say though, this first story arc, Until the End of the World, is amazing. It is one of my favorite volumes in all of Preacher. We are going to meet Jesse's evil family, especially his evil grandmother, who you just love to hate. They are such good villains, and they tormented Jesse so much when he was a child. The epic confrontation we get this volume is just really entertaining. So I'm very excited to dive into the story for Volume 2, Until the End of the World. Issue 8, All in the Family. This issue opens on a flashback. It is 1974. Little Jesse Custer watches these two hicks as one of them grabs his mom and is holding his hand over her mouth, and the other one is over by Jesse's dad, and he removes the sack over Jesse's dad's face, and then he shoots Jesse's dad in the head and kills him. These two hicks are named Theodore Charles, better known as T.C., as well as Jody. They are the head enforcers in Angelville and work for a Miss Mary L'Angel. In the current day, we see Jesse is tied up. He's restrained by some ropes. He yells all sorts of nasty things to his captors. We see Tulip is tied up as well. There is a woman, she says, "Oh, Jesse, is that any kind of way to talk to your grandma?" So Jesse's grandma is a real evil piece of work. We jump back again, this time to earlier that morning that day, before Jesse and Tulip got into this crazy situation. Tulip and Jesse were driving along, and then Tulip eventually told Jesse that she was a contract killer, and he did not take the news well, and he stopped the car. Tulip tells Jesse, "You killed him, man, a few days ago with that word of God power of yours. And your buddy Cassidy rips people's throats out whenever he gets hungry. I'm your girlfriend, why don't I get the benefit of the doubt?" Jesse says, "Oh, so you're my girlfriend now?" Tulip says, "Slip of the tongue." She talks Jesse into returning to the car so she can explain further. Tulip is going to go over her journey the last 5 years since the two of them last saw each other. So, 5 years ago, Jesse abandoned Tulip in Phoenix. So then, alone, she had to figure out where to go. So she waitressed a bit, but a customer grabbed her ass, so Tulip berated him, which got her fired. So then she drifted around for a couple of years and eventually wound up in Dallas. Her jobs were always lousy, she couldn't hold on to friends, so she started drinking. She became an alcoholic. One night she peed blood. That was her wake-up call that she needed to clean up. So she borrowed some money from a club owner she knew and checked into rehab with that money. After 2 months, she was clean, but the club owner she borrowed the money from, his name is McAvoy, and he wanted his money back. McAvoy is a club owner who has some criminal side hustles and fancies himself a made man. The two of them discussed how Tulip could pay him back. Tulip says that she can work it off, but McAvoy replies that he already has all the waitresses and lap dancers he needs. He does have one job, but it ain't the kind of thing for Tulip. Tulip says, "Try me." McAvoy says he needs someone to do hits, assassinations. Tulip thought about it. She imagined all these shitty things that would happen to her if she didn't come up with the money. So she said yes. McAvoy laughed at her. Tulip offers to prove herself and her pistol abilities on the shooting range out back. So they go out back and Tulip fires all bullseyes. Well, McAvoy can't argue with those results. He hires Tulip. Tulip explains she's a good shot because she grew up around guns in her family. Anyway, despite Tulip's ability, her first hit was kind of a mess, and it was what we saw go down in Volume 1, where she shot the guy sitting beside her target instead accidentally and missed her actual target. Tulip says to Jesse that McAvoy still wants his money back. Jesse says, well, to hell with him. We'll go see the son of a bitch first thing when we hit town, and I'm going to tell him to stick his money up his ass. And if he gives us any trouble, he'll use his word power on him. They show up to McAvoy's club. It's called Big Bad Max. They walk in and head to this McAvoy's office. Tulip apologizes. She says that she needs more time to get the money. And McAvoy asks her, why would I give you any more time? Jesse threatens this McAvoy. McAvoy, seeing he has more men in the room, is not scared and tells his men to tie Tulip up and break this reverend's goddamn neck. Now, while all this is going down in the office inside the club, we see outside in the front, a mysterious figure is approaching, and he points a gun to the head of the main bouncer protecting the front door. Back in McAvoy's office, Jesse gets prepared to use the word, but all of a sudden, a man busts into the room and begins opening fire. This man is Jody, the guy we saw in the beginning of the issue who killed Jesse's dad. We see the African-American man who got smacked by the door. Jody calls him the N-word and then shoots him in the head, killing him as well. Jesse, using the word power on Jody, says, drop the gun. Jody does not though. Jesse says it again, yelling it this time. For some reason though, his word power is not working on Jody. Jody appears immune to this Genesis ability. Jody announces, okay, now that we got that settled, let's take us a walk outside. TC's got the van ready. Jesse and Tulip are forced to get into the van, and in the van we see this TC guy, the other guy involved in the killing of Jesse's dad all those many years ago. So they all have some history. TC exclaims, I knew it was you. We were sitting here getting stoned for the trip home and I saw you go past. Tulip asks Jesse, who are these people? Jesse tells Jody and TC that Tulip is nobody, just some hitchhiker. You guys should let her go. That doesn't work though. They recognize Tulip from many years ago when Jesse was dating her back in Phoenix. They all drive in the van for a while. They are driving to somewhere near the Louisiana-Texas border. Jody tells Jesse that they were on a mission to bring Jesse back, along with anyone along with you. He tells Jesse, you should have came home after Anvil happened. You should have trusted your grandma, boy. They arrive to a fairly big house with a large gate and some burning crosses on the lawn. Jody announces, Angelville, welcome home, little Jesse. As they get out of the van, Tulip asks, where are they? Jesse says, if the devil created Texas like some folks say he did, this is where he rested on the seventh day. This is where I grew up, Tulip. This is where the story began. Jesse and Tulip get tied to some chairs. Jesse tells Tulip that her best chance is to not say a damn word. A woman in a wheelchair wheels herself in. She is Jesse's grandmother. Her name is Marie L'Angel. She is the matriarch of the L'Angel clan. She looks hideous, has barely any hair on her head. She looks withered, she's really old, she's a mean old bitch. She has various medical equipment hooked up to her. All of her enforcers in the room say, good evening, Miss Marie. Marie says hello to Jesse and insults Tulip, and she says that Tulip is too skinny. She doesn't have breeder's hips. What kind of children could she bear? Marie calls Tulip a whore. Tulip yells back, I don't know what gives you the right to. Jesse yells for Tulip to shut up though. Jody punches Tulip in the face, and Jesse yells at Jody and tells him, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna choke that black soul from your worthless corpse, and I'm going to do it with my own two hands. Swear to God, I swear to God you are dead. Jody is not scared. He says, tried that before, boy. Remember? Marie comments how angry Jesse is. She says that he has plenty of that Texas white trash in him like his father, that worthless waste of life who left you nothing but his name. Jesse says, "That's all I'll ever need." Marie threatens, "Well, perhaps I'll take that name from you too, Jesse, just like I've taken everything else. Perhaps I'll change your name like I changed my own when that useless cretin I married went and fell into the gumbo. Jesse Le Angel." Jesse says, "Ain't no way you can do that, not so it means a damn thing to me." And his grandma replies, "Oh Jesse, don't you understand? There is nothing I can't do. You must be wondering why your word power didn't work on Jody, or why I had him look for you even when you faked your death. Because, Jesse, the one you are searching for is with me. I have the Lord on my side. I know what became of you in Anvil. I know about Genesis, and the angels, and the Saint of Killers. You're mine again, like you always were. You're going to be a minister again, as God intended. And as I will guide you, your whore is the proof. You'll be left alone with her till dawn, because Grandma loves you and wants you to know true happiness. And then, because Grandma wants you to know that she's in charge forever, Jody will blow the little bitch's brains out." After this confrontation, Jesse and Tulip are left alone. Jesse apologizes for not telling Tulip everything about his past. Tulip asks, "Well, how about telling me now? I think you owe me. I'm not going anywhere." Jesse replies, "Oh baby, oh Jesus Christ in heaven, yeah." Issue 9, When the Story Began. Jesse is explaining to Tulip his family history. Back in the late 1960s, we see Jesse's mom and dad meeting for the first time. His dad is John Custer, a Vietnam War vet, and his mom is Christina Custer, or going by her maiden name, Christina Le Angel. Jesse's dad, John, returned from the Vietnam War, and Jesse's mom, Christina, spat on John's face, calling him a baby killer, as often Vietnam War vets would face harassment from anti-war civilians upon returning home. Christina is with some hippies who are cheering her on, and they are all saying anti-war slogans to John, calling John Uncle Sam's murder machine, and a Nazi bastard and a murdering piece of shit. John walks away, not wanting to get violent. John goes to dinner to get some food, and Christina felt really bad about spitting in his face earlier, so she comes to see John in the diner, and they both actually break down and cry a bit, even though they are strangers, and they hug. They go outside and talk on a park bench. Christina apologizes, and John says it's cool. He's heard stuff from guys on their second tour, how there wasn't a hero's welcome waiting for them back home like there was for their daddies back in World War II. But he just keeps his head down and was focused on getting home. He didn't kill any babies, but there's no denying that he saw and did some pointless mess-up stuff over there. The two talk some more and eventually kiss. They end up spending the night together that night and started a relationship. 1.5 years later, Jesse was born. Fast forward a few years after that, Jesse is talking, and John and Christina have built a nice little life together. John is showing Jesse John Wayne films and they are both bonding over them. Overall, it is just family bliss. But then Jody and T.C. came into the picture and ended all of that. Jesse, talking to Tulip, explains that T.C. is basically a dumbass. He just takes orders, and he likes having sex with animals and things like that. But Jody is a real mean, bad dude. He is the leading expert on screwing people over before they screw him. Back in the flashback, we see Jody tell Christina that she messed up, and they are taking her home. John tries to defend his wife. Eventually, John and Jody get to fighting. John ends up getting the upper hand and punching Jody in the gut and smashing his head in through a table. But as John sort of wins, TC points a gun at John's head. So as the fight is going on, little Jesse yells out, "Dad!" And then TC and Jody realize that Christina has a kid. So the family must not have known about Christina's relationship these past several years and the fact that she was a mother. So the plan initially was only to take Christina back home, but now that she has a kid, they gotta take all three of them back to Angelville, back to Marie L'Angel. Jesse explains that his grandma was about 80 years old then, and she had Christina when she was like 60. Jesse doesn't even know how that's possible. So Christina, John, and little Jesse were all moved back to the Angelville plantation, and Jesse then explains the history of the L'Angel family. He says they're a French Puritan family. They settled here around the time of Napoleon. They converted the local Indians to corpses, cheaper than Christianity, and set about spreading the word to any settlers dumb enough to show up. All the men were preachers, except in times of war, and the women were meant for nothing more than breeding the next generation, which they took to real well. Family goes way back. Blood is everything. And Grandma, she was keeping up the tradition with a vengeance. Believe me, couldn't find anyone to marry her till she was over 50, probably because she was born with a face like dried up shit and a soul to match. So when little Jesse and his dad and mom were brought back to this Angelville plantation, Marie L'Angel told Jesse's dad, "John Custer, you will marry my daughter. You will both live here with your son, Jesse, as a proper family in the eyes of the Lord. You will care for them as a husband and father. You will groom your son for his destiny as a man of God. And you will never leave this place. If a day comes on which you are foolish enough to try, you will die." So Jesse and Christina got married, and they lived as prisoners there. John, he was smart enough to hold off for the right time to try and make a break for it, just like Christina did 5 years earlier when she escaped, just like Jesse would do 12 years in the future. Eventually, after about a year of living here, John decided to finally try and make an escape attempt with his son, Jesse. Because John knew it was dangerous, he wanted to have a talk with his son, so he tells him, "I need you to be brave for me, son, and I need you to know some things in case we don't get a chance to talk about them later. I love you, Jesse. You're my own son and I'm proud of you, and you brought your mom and me more happiness than I ever knew there was. You be good to her and look after her, and you be a good guy, Jesse. You gotta be like John Wayne. You don't take shit off fools, and you judge a person by what's in them, not how they look, and you do the right thing. You gotta be one of the good guys, son, 'cause there's way too many of the bad." So Jesse and his dad tried to escape, and Jesse explains, "They caught us before we got 2 miles, and they shot my daddy in the head." Jesse explains that was the last time he cried. See, Jody shot his dad, and Jesse, he just stood there and bawled and screamed his heart out. And Jody turned to him and said, "Fucking little crybaby." Jesse says he was only 5, but he knew what Dad had meant about too many of the bad guys, and he knew that John Wayne never cried, so neither did he. He never wanted to give anyone else the satisfaction of ever seeing him cry again. Jesse had a semi-normal childhood for a few years after this. He watched TV, he had a little dog named Duke, which he loved, and he had a best friend named Billy Bob Bobbs. Billy Bob has only one eye because his family wanted to keep their bloodline pure, so they did tons of inbreeding. Jesse and Billy Bob would play, fish, and watch cartoons. Jesse's grandma, meanwhile, tried to indoctrinate him into religion. She sat him down and said, "Today, Jesse, Grandma's going to tell you about your special friend, God. God's special because he's always with you. He lives inside you, in your heart, and he sees everything you do, and he knows what you're thinking, always. God loves you very much because he made you, and God wants you to love him, because if you love him and do good things all your life, he'll take you away to live with him when you die. Now, isn't it nice to hear you have a friend like God?" And Jesse replies, "No, Grandma, it's kind of scary." And Jesse's grandma then slaps him in the face, drawing some blood. Jesse, after this, he just realized he should just tell his grandma what she wants to hear, so he says, yes, it was nice to have a friend like God. Under his grandmother's rules, Jesse was to learn the Bible and be prepared to be a reverend. His mother tried her best, but she did grow sad over the years over the death of her husband, and the life was slowly draining out of her. Although, she still tried to push through and watch Jesse grow up, and she taught him English, math, history, but she felt helpless to protect him both directly and indirectly. When Jesse was 11 years old, his dog Duke was barking near Jody and jumping on him. So Jody grabs the dog and hammers a nail into the dog's head, killing him, nailing the dog to the fence post. A little 11-year-old Jesse runs out and yells, "Duke!" Then he turns to Jody and says, "You dirty fucker!" Jody tells Jesse, "Christ's sake, boy, it's just a mutt." And Jesse screams, "Ah, you bastard!" Jesse's grandma, hearing him swear, asks, "Where did you learn language like that?" And Jesse says, "Grandma, he killed Duke, I hate him." And Jesse's grandma doesn't care. She doesn't like Jesse swearing. She tells him that he's going in the coffin for punishment. Jesse's mom, Christina, familiar with this coffin punishment, says, "You did it to me, but no way are you doing that to him." And the grandma replies, "If I say he goes in the coffin, he goes in the coffin." Christina replies, "Over my dead body, you sick old whore." Mary L'Angel, listening to her daughter talk to her like this, did some calculus in her head. Christina, her daughter, had already given birth to the next generation in Jesse, and that is the only use for women in the L'Angel family. She served her purpose, so the grandma gave the order to get rid of Christina, her own daughter. The grandma orders Jesse's mom to be dragged away, and she was never seen again. Jesse was then hauled over to a coffin at the end of a dock. He is put in the coffin, and the coffin is going to be submerged into the bottom of the swamp with a tube that is going to feed Jesse air, and he will be trapped down there for quite some time. Issue 10, How I Learned to Love the Lord. Jesse spent 1 week in the coffin, trapped at the bottom of the swamp. He could breathe through the tube okay, but he couldn't figure time, couldn't see a goddamn thing, and he was starving. When Jesse finally pulled out of the coffin after a week, he was white and pale and sick and covered in his own filth. But he would now be obedient. He was forced to study under his grandmother, who terrified him with tales of an omniscient God. Jesse would be expected to go to preacher school one day and become a preacher. Jesse did have his friend though, that one-eyed Billy Bob. And Billy Bob had his deformity, but he had a good heart and he was a good friend to Jesse. Billy Bob was set to be married to his sister at 16 years old, and he was really excited about it. He asked Jesse to be his best man, and Jesse said that he would do it. But then came the day that T.C. fucked the chicken. See, Billy Bob slept over at Jesse's place on account of the storm the night before, and Jesse's grandmother wouldn't let Billy Bob sleep in the house. She said, "The barn is good enough for his kind." So Billy Bob was sleeping in the barn when T.C. came in and was riling to have sex with that chicken. Billy Bob hid. He knew he'd be dead if T.C. spotted him. No way T.C. would believe that he wasn't spying on him. But T.C. went to take a leak, and he pissed on Billy's face, and then Billy screamed and got out of his hiding spot. T.C., startled, grabbed Billy Bob and stabbed him with a knife in his throat. Billy Bob ran out of the barn screaming, yelling help. Billy Bob ran his way over to Jesse, only dying a few meters away from him on the ground. Jesse, furious that T.C. killed his best and only friend, Jesse attacks T.C., punches him in the face, and calls him a cocksucker as he kicks him in the nuts, and T.C. falls down to the ground. Jody walks over to Jesse and is in his face. Jesse tells T.C., fuck you, Jody. You get out of my way or I'll kick your redneck ass worse than my daddy did. Jody laughs and says, yeah, I think you're old enough for this, boy. The two of them fight. Jesse gets in a few good shots, but Jody just smiles with blood dripping down his lip. Jody then throws a big haymaker and Jesse goes flying down to the ground. Jody then grabs Jesse and puts him in an arm lock. And Jody taunts him, saying, you know what to say, don't you? So say it. Say it! Jesse screams, Uncle! As Jody breaks Jesse's arm. Jody ended up fixing Jesse's arm and jaw, and Jesse was to be put in the coffin in the swamp once again because his grandmother heard him use a curse when he attacked T.C. So Jesse was put down in the coffin for 2 weeks this time. When Jesse got out and his arm had healed, Jesse went to see Billy Bob's family and apologized for their son's death as much as he could, but his apology was for naught. Billy Bob's family told Jesse that he was from a terrible family, the Angels, and nothing good would ever come from them. This was the final straw for Jesse. He had had enough now. The Angelville plantation with his grandmother is all he had really known most of his life, but he was not going to stay there anymore. So he ran away, and he hitchhiked to Beaumont, Texas. He was about 17 years old at the time, and Jesse, while growing up on the plantation, learned a lot about horses and how to do all kinds of manual labor. So he was able to do odd jobs from town to town, and then he would come down south to Austin or San Antonio on the weekends and spend all his hard-earned money. After about a year or two of being on his own and working, he ran into Tulip down at a bar. Tulip is about 3 years older than Jesse, and she was immediately attracted to him. She stole him away from the girl that Jesse was dating at the time, and the two of them would get into lots of trouble. They would have sex and steal cars and drive them into the desert and eventually sell them. As they are out in the desert this one time, Tulip asks Jesse, do you love me? And Jesse says, yeah, I do, like I never loved anyone before. I love you until the end of the world. Which is the title of the volume, by the way, hence the significance. Tulip and Jesse dated for a while. Eventually, they made their way to Phoenix. Both of them just lived off all the stolen cars that they would sell, and they made plans for the future. They would steal some more cars and save up enough dough and then head to California. Tulip, she went to the liquor store to get her and Jesse a beer, and Jesse, as he's alone, comments to himself that he's gonna ask Tulip to marry him. But all that got thrown out the window when Jody and T.C. finally caught up to Jesse. Jody tells Jesse, I'll make this real simple. You come with us nice and quiet and don't make no fuss, or I'll shoot her through the head. So, Jesse left with them, and Tulip came back, and she wondered why Jesse abandoned her and disappeared. Back in the current day, Tulip tells Jesse, I've been hating you for 5 years for no reason at all. Why didn't you tell me? And Jesse answers because he's an idiot. He didn't want to have to explain about his grandma and Angelville and all that shit. He figured she would think he was some kind of freak. Jesse says when he got back home, he spent a month in the coffin. And then when he came out of that coffin, he was a broken man. And that is when he truly learned to love the Lord. That's what God's there for when you're beaten, when you haven't an ounce of fight left in you, when you just can't hack it by yourself anymore. You turn to Jesus or you stick a gun in your mouth. Jesse's grandma pulled a few strings and he got pushed through the ministry in record time. A couple years later, and Reverend Jesse Custer was doing the Lord's work among the good people of Annville, Texas. Couple of years of that, and Jesse was putting away a bottle of Jack Daniels every night. And then eventually we catch up to the time where Jesse was at the beginning of the story, back in volume 1 when he was cursing out the entire town down at the local bar. Back in the current day though, Jesse's grandma, along with T.C. and Jody, enter the room where Tulip and Jesse were being held. Jesse tells Tulip that he loves her and he will love her until the end of the world. Jesse's grandma says good morning. She motions for Jody to get to work. Jody pulls out his gun and points it to Tulip's head, and Jesse is screaming and saying, wait a minute. Grandma, wait, stop. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Stop. Jody, drop it. Tulip asks, can she not even kiss him goodbye? And Jody pulls the trigger and the bullet goes right through Tulip's head and she dies. Issue 11, Pardners. Jesse is still in shock about Tulip's death, and his grandma tells him everything's gonna be fine. We can use your word to our advantage now. We can make this family what was before, rebuild the dynasty to serve his glory for eternity. You're better off without her. Jesse's grandma then wheels into the next room to talk with T.C. and Jody. T.C. asks, should we get the coffin ready, ma'am? And the grandma says, no, I don't think that will be necessary. Just look at him. He's beaten. He's lost. The last spark of will and wickedness in him is gone forever. And the only thing that could have kept him from becoming mine again is lying over there on the floor, she says, referring to Tulip. Jody and Marie L'Angel discuss Jesse's word power. Marie tells Jody, it'll never work on us. She then tells Jody to take the body of Tulip up to her bedroom, and whatever you do, don't leave TC alone with her. Jody says, I don't think TC would try to do that with the dead girl. And Marie says, well, just in case. As she starts wheeling out of this room, she says, I'm glad this is over. I have lived longer than expected just to ensure the future of this grand old place. It will be a relief to rest at last, Jody. We see Tulip. She has been brought to the bedroom Jody was ordered to bring her to. She is lying in the bedroom. She is dead. But all of a sudden, she opens her eyes and is alive once again, and the bullet wound in her head is gone. She exclaims, Jesus Christ! All of a sudden, a bright light appears in the room and she is startled by it. Stepping away from Tulip for a bit, TC and Jody get to talking. TC comments about how Jesse reacted to Tulip being shot, and he says, Jesse looks like he took a shit and found his liver in a bowl. TC asks why Jody looks so glum, and Jody says Marie doesn't show him a tenth of the kindness she has showed Jesse over the years, and I'm ready to die for her. Jesse, that bastard, has a mean, ungrateful streak a half a mile wide. That's why I never did take to liking him, you know. I can't abide by them that won't stand by their own. We see Jesse in the room alone, and all of a sudden John Wayne appears to him once again. And John Wayne says, I hate to say it to you like this, Pilgrim, but the bastard sorta got himself a point. Jesse asks John Wayne, what? And John Wayne says, well, you ain't done well by me now, have you? Jesse asks, how the hell can you stand there and say that? You know I've looked up to you since I was 3 years old, since True Grit. We see Jesse watching the movie True Grit in the theater with his dad and mom. John Wayne replies, oh yeah? So how come I listened to you tell your girl your story and I didn't hear my name mentioned once? Jesse replies, I don't know, it's kind of difficult to talk about when I ain't too sure of the details of our relationship myself. Look, it ain't the fact that we talk that bothers me as such, like I say it's the details, like, you know, you died in 1979, but you started showing up to me 4 years earlier, right after my daddy was killed. And it seems like I'm the only one that can see ya. And hell, I ain't ungrateful, but except for filling me in on the Sainted Killers, you ain't ever really told me anything I couldn't figure out myself. Am I right? And John Wayne replies, well, pardon me all to hell. Looked to me like your back was to the wall. Never figured it was time for damn fool questions. John Wayne asks Jesse, you recall what I said to you the first time they shut you in the coffin? And then we see a flashback to that moment in time when Jesse was first in there at the bottom of the swamp. And John Wayne says to Jesse, can you hear me, Pilgrim? I know you must be pretty scared in there. Hell, a fella ought to have to be some kind of hero not to be scared where you are right now. But you got two things on your side, son. You got what your daddy said the night before they shot him, and you got me here for you, just like I told you. If you can remember that, Pilgrim, you can get through anything. So back in the current day, John Wayne asks Jesse, so why the hell didn't you remember? Outside on the porch, we see Marie L'Angel, T.C, and Jody are talking. T.C reports that Jesse is talking to himself like a fool. Marie says we'll see how he is after a day's rest. She tells T.C to take a look at him at sundown. We jump back to Tulip in the bedroom, now alive once again. She refuses to look at the bright light in the room with her. A voice in the room asks Tulip why she won't even look upon him. Tulip says she's scared, she thinks she might be dead. And the voice replies, and so you were shot through the head. You died instantly, but I am with you. I am the resurrection and the life, and may you live again. I love you. Look at me, Tulip. There is no need to be afraid. And then we see the face of God. He does kind of look like the stereotypical male with a beard and hair, glowy figure that you would expect to represent God. Tulip is kind of confused though, and she looks around at her surroundings and says, wait a minute, what kind of heaven is this? It just looks like someone's bedroom, and I don't feel dead. And God responds, you are not. I told you, child, I am the resurrection. I am the way and the truth and the light. I am the Alpha and the Omega and the bright morning star. I am the Lord your God. Oh yes, I am your Father in heaven, child. I love you as I love all my children on this earth. I want you to live, and I want you to love me. And I want Jesse to love me too. Go to him for me, Tulip. Tell him how I love him so that I have brought you back. Tell him there is no need for him to search the world for me or wonder why I wander far from paradise. All I ask is that he trusts me once again. And Tulip questions, trust you? And God answers, is that so much for the Creator to ask of his creation? His grandmother and her cohorts are evil people. Tell him I have restored his power over them, that he may judge them as he sees fit. Then both of you may go in peace. Now, I have dealt more than fairly with him, Tulip. His love and trust are but a little price to ask. What do you think he'd say to me, And Tulip thinks about it and responds, I think he'd say, cut the shit. To explain the significance of this scene, basically, God tried to put Jesse off of his quest to find him, so God granted Marie L'Angel and her henchmen immunity from Jesse's Genesis-granted powers, and allowed these henchmen of Marie to murder Tulip. Then God resurrected Tulip and withdrew his protection from Jesse's enemies. For this, God asks Tulip to ask Jesse to give up his quest. Tulip definitely thinks something is off here, though. Back over to Jesse and John Wayne. John asks, what happened to that tough little pilgrim who wouldn't cry for that scum when they shot his daddy down? And Jesse answers, I don't know. And John responds, let me tell you, you quit. You forgot the things I told you to get through, didn't you? Ain't like the first time, neither. Or did you forget that as well? Jesse responds, no, that day is gonna live with me forever because that's the day I gave in to my grandma and said I would be a minister. On that day, all you said to me was... The only thing John Wayne would say to Jesse is call him a faggot. Jesse then tells John Wayne, that's when you turned away and walked away from me. And John explained that he didn't go far. He was watching Jesse. We see Jesse unhappy and struggling in the past when he was a reverend. He is cursing God and he says, you're sitting up there watching me trying to spread the word to these white trash people. How you must be laughing your goddamn ass off at me. Well, fuck you and the cross you rode in on. John Wayne explains to Jesse how you always let them beat you, damn it. And what are they but a mean old gal from a long line of similar backed by a bunch of trash? She broke you like a headstone bronco. She knows when to give you rope and when to pull you in, and she knows exactly when to kick you when you're down. Yeah, life's turned out rough on you, but that ain't no surprise. Your daddy told you that. Says you gotta be one of the good guys. And Jesse finishes the line, because there's too many of the bad. Jesse, he does feel a little bit motivated by this pep talk from John Wayne, and he replies, "You're right. I let them beat me. I quit on my dad and I quit on you. I don't know why you just didn't do the same." And John Wayne replies, "Darn it, Pilgrim, because we're partners." Jesse sleeps for a bit, and when he wakes up, TC is pointing a shotgun at Jesse. But Jesse has his word power restored now over his family. He doesn't know it immediately, but he tells TC, "Point that thing somewhere else, will ya?" And TC does. Jesse then tells TC to drop it, and TC obeys. Jesse, realizing his power is back over his family, he says, "Well, well, well." TC, scared, calls for Jody. Jesse, though, attacks TC and punches him in the belly, and then he grabs TC's hair and yanks on it. He then smashes TC's face into the floor, and he does so repeatedly again and again, until we see TC's face is a bloody mess. Jesse then smokes a cigarette and says, "No more quitting. I'm gonna go get Grandma and Jody and the rest of that vermin, and I'm gonna stamp them into the shit that they came from. And then I'm going back to look for God, and when I find him, he better have a frickin' good excuse." John Wayne replies, "Glad to hear it, Pilgrim, because there's a little girl lying dead out there that needs avenging. You can talk the talk. Now let's see ya walk the walk." And Jesse replies, "You got it." Issue 12. Until the End of the World, the final issue in this storyline. We jump over to Tulip and God, still talking in the bedroom. Tulip tells God, "I'm just not buying your bullshit." And God tells Tulip, "We've been here all day, this is unnecessary. I told you, you and Jesse can go your own way." Tulip asks, "Just so long as he stays off your case, What I want to know is, why do you have to be so cruel about it? Killing me just to bring me back to life? Leaving Jesse at the mercy of his bitch grandma? And why tell me instead of him?" And God replies, "It is not for you to understand my way. All you need to do is accept and trust." And Tulip says, "That's funny. That's exactly what I used to hear in Sunday school, and I didn't like it then either. I've never been one for blind faith. I got my own theory. I don't think you're such hot shit. I reckon you're scared of meeting Jesse face to face. And I notice you've quit the silly special effects too." And God replies, "That is quite enough. I am leaving. You go to Jesse Custer and you tell him this has been a warning. You tell him that unless he forgets this ridiculous attempt to hunt me down, things will be much worse next time. I am a loving God, Tulip, but don't push it." Jesse's grandma then wheels herself into the room where Tulip's dead body is supposed to be. The grandma says, "Where's that skinny little slut's corpse?" Tulip then kicks the grandmother's wheelchair over, causing her to fall down to the floor. Tulip then leaves the bedroom and locks the door, trapping the grandmother inside the room. The grandmother crawls over to the nearby window and takes a look outside. Now we see Jesse is in the backyard, and he is taking his vengeance on some of his grandmother's various enforcers. Jesse, using the word power, says, "Burn, you fuckers." We see the various henchmen are all engulfed in flames, and the house is also catching on fire. Jody is covered in flames as well, but he manages to coolly walk over to a tub of water situated outside and dives into it, putting out the fire on him. Jesse's plan is to head back into the house and deal with his grandma, but Jody is now there, standing up to him and confronting him. They stare each other down a bit, and Jesse tells Jody, "I could tell you to shove that thing up your ass and you would do it." And Jody replies, "Yeah, but you ain't gonna do that." Jesse says, "No." Jody replies, "There's hope for you yet, boy." Jody throws his gun on the ground, and the two of them are going to have a fight and finally prove who is the superior man. Jody tells Jesse, "I always figured you for a sissy. You always gave in too easy." Jesse says, "I just beat TC's goddamn brains out." Jesse then smirks and begins punching Jody twice in the face, once in the stomach. Jody swings back but misses. Jesse punches Jody in the back of the neck and Jody falls down to the ground. Jesse then grabs Jody by the hair and kicks him. Jody then says, Jody can't seem to get the words out. Jesse tells him that he's getting old. Inside the house, Tulip is walking downstairs. She grabs TC's shotgun that was lying on the floor, and she follows the trail of blood and sees that TC is still alive. TC is scared though, as he feels his brains running down his head. Tulip then walks over to TC, and we assume she blasts him away with the shotgun she is holding. Outside, Jesse and Jody are still fighting. Jody seems to be making a little bit of a comeback here. He punches Jesse and Jesse goes flying through a nearby fence. Jesse grabs a piece of that broken fence and swings at Jody with it. And the nails in the fence piece manage to stick into Jody's face. And Jody, like a creepy, unbeatable bastard, removes the fence nail to his face with a smile on. Jody then kicks Jesse to the ground and asks him, "So you really want to fight?" He then kicks Jesse and grabs Jesse's hand and breaks some of his fingers. Then he headbutts Jesse. Now from the house, Grandma Marie L'Angel yells, "Kill him, Jody! He's burnt my beautiful house down! He's finished this family! He's no kin of mine! Kill him!" Jody starts walking over to Jesse with the intention of finishing him up. Jody tells Jesse, "I suppose now you're gonna start whining about me shooting your asshole of a father, huh?" Jody then grabs Jesse and puts him in an arm lock. This scene is supposed to mirror the exact same scene we saw earlier that happened when Jesse was a kid, where Jody put Jesse in an arm lock and made him say "uncle" and then broke his arm. So Jody, with Jesse in this arm lock now, says, "Now I'm gonna kill you like your grandma says to, but you listen good. You don't tell me what I want to hear and I'm gonna do it slow. You're up against a brick wall here, boy. You gonna fold up against it too like I seen you do before? So say what you gotta say. Say it like last time. Say it!" Jesse then screams and bites into Jody's arm with all the strength he can muster. He bites so hard he manages to rip a chunk out of Jody's arm out. Jody lets go and says, "Jesus shit." Jesse then kicks Jody and Jody goes flying to the grass below. Jesse then stomps on Jody's spine, breaking his back. Jesse then takes some time, catching his breath, and Jody, unable to move, lying there, tells Jesse, "I'm proud of you, boy." Jesse finally beat him fair and square, no use of his word power. Jesse then begins strangling Jody and yells, "Bastard, fucking die!" And the life slowly drains away from Jody's eyes. Inside the upstairs bedroom, we see Jesse's grandma. She notices that the oxygen tank connected to her wheelchair is a ticking time bomb and will soon explode. She then says, "No! I'll get you, Jesse Custer! You're a vicious, wicked little whelp and I'm going to punish you! I promise you, you brat! I'll be waiting for you in hell!" The oxygen tank explodes from the flames and causes a huge explosion in the room, and Mary L'Angel dies perishing in the flames. Jesse, celebrating outside, says, "Burn, you fucking witch, burn!" And then he laughs, "Yeehaw!" He finally defeated his horrible family. Jesse goes to light a cigarette, not having a lighter though. He goes into Jody's pocket and grabs his lighter, which has "fuck communism" engraved into it. Jesse then lights up and says, "Fuck you, Grandma. Fuck you all and all of your monsters." As Jesse is smoking, Tulip walks outside and sees him and asks, "What did they do to you?" And Jesse replies, "Ain't nothing. Dear Lord Jesus, don't let me be dreaming. Jesse doesn't know how Tulip is alive, and Tulip says, "You're never gonna believe, I mean." Jesse interrupts and says, "I don't care how, I don't give a good goddamn." And the two of them kiss with the flames of the house burning in the background. And that is the end of the story arc. Alright, so that was the story arc with Jesse's evil family, and I love it. I love that it was very self-contained. It has a beginning, middle, and end. In the beginning, we meet Jesse's parents, see them fall in love. We see little Jesse, but then we have them being taken over by the grandmother and taken to the grandmother's plantation, where just shit goes off the rails, and Jesse's dad dies in front of him, and Jesse is just being tortured. He's put in that coffin in the lake for a week, for 2 weeks. His dog gets killed. His best friend gets killed. He's forced to become a priest. When he runs away, finally, he's hunted down to the ends of the earth, and he's brought back. So when he finally gets his comeuppance and revenge on Jody by killing him in a fair fight, that is fantastic. And then the evil grandmother, she burns to death, and Jesse in front of the fire says, "Burn, you fucking witch!" And he screams. That's fantastic stuff, man. I love so many parts about this volume. The nitpicky stuff I'm not so enthused by is the whole Tulip dying and being brought back to life by God. It gets a little convoluted and whatnot, but still, I really love this volume. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Thank you all for watching, and I will be back next week with part 2 of Volume 2, the Hunters storyline.